Hello, fiends, friends, and familiars. This is Matt Orozco here from Macabre Daily, and I am beyond excited today to be joined by Chad Ferrin, who is the writer and director by the forthcoming soon to be released rather, HP Lovecraft adaptation, Unspeakable Beyond the Wall of Sleep. And Chad, folks probably know you from some of your other genre films, what you spent over 2 decades doing, from things like The Ghouls, Nightcaller, and Pig Killer. So just super excited to have you back talking again.
Oh, thanks for having me, and great to be here.
Excellent. Well, Chad, I know we don't have all the time in the world because if we did, I'd take it and to ask you all the questions. But I'm going to kick off with one that's I think you're probably used to getting asked at this point, having done your third Lovecraft adaptation, which is, his stories, and in particular this one, are rather short. They tend to have kind of a very, and they're done in almost a diary style, a clinical diary style writing that is somewhat uh, kind of pushes people away, I guess, for lack of a better term. How did you decide what to interpret directly from Lovecraft's work? And then when did you decide to deviate? Because there are quite a few deviations, which are amazing and fun. But how did you make that decision?
Well, it kind of started with uh, my first film, Unspeakable. I was doing, I finished Nightcaller and did a sequel to that, and Roger Garcia, who starred in Unspeakable, said, "Hey, why don't you do a sequel to Unspeakable? I mean, it's been 20 years," and I'm like, "Well, it didn't make any money, so I mean, but if you've got some money and some investors, then hey, I'm happy to crank something out." And he comes back, a month later and said, "Look, I've got an investor. He really wants to do a sequel to Unspeakable." And I sat down and I started trying to think how I can do a sequel to that film. And I'm like, oh, Lovecraft. So I remembered the Lovecraft story that dealt with dreams and whatever beyond the wall of sleep. So I reread that, and it kind of just sparked this excitement of kind of trying to combine these two films into one. And it just kind of had a life of its own. I started writing, and I loved where it was going. And I sent the script back to Roger, and his investor hated it and said, there's penises, monsters, there's all this stuff. I'm not putting money into this. And I'm like, well, oh shit. So I really dug the script, and I sent it to Susan Prever. She dug it. She found another investor, and then we pretty much were off and running, making it. So
Wow, that's amazing. And I did pick up on that. I was going to ask you a little later. This is, in fact, my next question I written down was that this is kind of, you're almost a continuation of the James Phelps story that you started Unspeakable.
right.
Um, and what have you learned in your process of adapting Lovecraft a few times here? Because again, you're in a small crowd of folks really that's just like you and pretty much Stuart Gordon and Brian Yunza have been the only
Right.
ones that do more than like one or two adaptations of Lovecraft. So what have you learned since doing the deep ones that you were able to kind of apply to adapting Unspeakable?
It's just, I guess having a, and if I love his work, and I love, just kind of filtering it through my own perspective of things. And, I try to be as faithful to it as I can, but at the same time, you got to be, as a filmmaker, you have to be, faithful to yourself as well. And if things that excite you and whatever, and it might piss off some fans, it might do this, it might do that. And the budget restrictions, which is another
Sure,
major thing that you always have to, you know, filter that through, but at the same time I don't let it stop me. It's just
sure.
like, I may not have the money to do this, but I love the characters he's created and what this world that we can try to emulate and create our own. And I just, dive into it, and you know devil be there, and do what we can with what we got, and hopefully it finds an audience and people appreciate that. It got out there, because that's really, one of the hardest things is you make these things for 100 grand, you shoot it in 10 days, and you do the best you can with what you have and hope that a distributor likes it, one, and then two, an audience likes it and finds it,
Right.
and then it makes some money, and then you continue doing these things. And it's, it's one of the most frustrating things when a film doesn't click, and it kind of just disappears, and you're like, oh, that was, I feel bad for the investors and these people that aren't making their money back. But it's like a big gamble, all films. So
Yeah.
you hope that it finds an audience and it makes it. And luckily, the great thing with Lovecraft, it has a built-in audience, and so it has an easier way of getting out there.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a kind of got a marketing vehicle inherent embedded in it already. With being Lovecraft, having it being able to attach Lovecraft to it does give you a little bit of an edge, if you will, on as far as the marketing goes. And you're right about something about finding distribution and kind of getting your films out there, because one of the things I was always curious to ask you about is you have a pretty consistent, almost industrial like process of releasing a film, 1 to 2 films a year. And I know you kind of, I'm sure you experience a lot of struggles getting those things made, but how do you keep to such a schedule like that and maintain motivation in the face of, what is probably some rejection, some pushback, obviously inherent challenges?
Well, I think that's the beauty of making a couple of them a year is the rejection on the first one that you made that year. It kind of your mind is busy with the other films, so you're not
Sure.
too. It takes away a lot of the angst and the waiting for answers from distributors or festivals or rejections or all that stuff, because you're like, I've got another film that's finishing post and I'm working on a script for another one. So it kind of just rolls off your back. Or you'll get a 5-star review and you're like, oh, that's great. Well, I'm working on this other film. So it evens itself out in a way that it doesn't bother me in any way, shape, or form, except wanting it to get out there and again make the investors their money back. Because that, for me, having made Unspeakable by selling the first film, by selling my house and losing everything, I know the pitfalls of being
Right.
putting your own money behind your own film and then not doing well with it. So I always tell an investor, it's a gamble, and if you're doing it for the love of the film or the project, or you know or wanting to be a millionaire, forget the millionaire part.
Right.
You're doing it because you love making films, and you're making it for the love of it and not for the money of it.
I think you have a good point there to kind of aspiring filmmakers that, you know, want to do more and but are constantly worried about making sure they get one off the ground. And it's like, well, you've got a lot of irons in the fire, you've got more opportunities. So I think that can also keep you a little bit more focused on the next thing, as you said, as opposed to worrying about what's happening in the current production or
Right.
distribution. Because yeah, it can be brutal. I don't know firsthand, but we speak with so many filmmakers. It's like we hear a lot of the same things about how hard it is to, not only get a film made, but then to get someone to actually pick it up and share it with a wider audience. That's the final
Well,
leg, if you will.
and then once they share it, you hope that the audience enjoys it. And I guess the whole point is word of mouth at that point, where people are telling their friends to see it, and then a lot of people are watching it and watching it and watching it, and the distributor's like, "Hey, this film's doing pretty well. Let's make another one with you," or whatever it might be. But I think that's the hard part of even getting a theatrical release. Is almost near impossible these days. And then when you see a film that gets that and it does well, and then you just tell the distributor, hey, well, that just did well, why don't you take a gamble on it? And then they're just like, nah, we just throw it out on Tubi and hope for the best. And it's just like, well, it goes down to maybe there's just too much product or whatever, because it's hard to find a distributor that's really going to take a gamble on a film and put a big chunk of money behind it,
Right.
and then and get it out there and get it seen and advertise it and whatever. And it's one of those things that I kind of gave up on, and just I put my nose to the grindstone. I'm going to make these with the money we got, do the best we can, and hope for the best. And I don't sit there and my life and world doesn't depend upon Unspeakable, Beyond the Wall of Sleep doing well. I hope it does, but I've gone on to other films, and you just keep that momentum going until it dries up and you shoot yourself.
I mean, hopefully it doesn't end all that sadly, but I
I
do
hope
think
not.
that there is, an element of it is hard to get and find an audience, and it is hard to kind of find the right people. So you just have to keep, you have to have it for the love of the game, if you will.
Right.
And I'm curious to know how you mentioned Tubi a little bit, and I think there's varying opinions on how streaming services have both been a burden and a blessing to independent film production. So I'm curious to know from your perspective, like where do you sit on the lines of streaming? Like, is this something that is overall net positive or maybe net negative in terms of the film experience?
They're awful. Comparing it to what it used to be. And
Sure.
the Ghouls is a perfect example where I sold that to Blockbuster, and you get $200,000 on that sale alone, and then you'd get it made a huge chunk of money for a $10,000 film,
Yeah.
20 fucking years ago. Now you're lucky to get, $200,000 for the entire film selling throughout the entire world. I mean, and the streaming aspect is just, you're getting a penny an hour for Amazon.
Wow.
Or half a penny. It's something just insanely ridiculous, the amount of money that comes in on
Jeez.
Amazon, just per view of each film. And it's one of those things where, like Pig Killer didn't get up on Tubi because they found it too exploitive or whatever it might be. So the distributor's like, well, that's a huge revenue loss just not getting on there, because advertisers don't want to put their commercials behind something that's got nudity or extreme whatever in that case, or whatever their reasoning was. But so the distributor tells me, look, we need a cut version, we need this, and
Wow.
it just becomes more of something that's like, well, if you have to cut a version for Tubi, it kind of, I'm fine doing that, but at the same time, well, the uncut version is then only on Blu-ray or whatever, and that market is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So it just kind of is frustrating. And I found it just much better before the streaming of being able to actually make money on a film, and it got out there in an uncut version that people were able to buy and see and whatever. And now it's just more of a, even though it's streaming is out to more and more and more and more people, and they're able to
Sure.
just watch it on their phone or on their laptop or on their TV in an instant. It just kind of takes away the my old school love of going into a video store and grabbing it off the shelf and going home and watching it.
Well, I mean, I mean, you mentioned before about risk taking. That was the financial justification to take risks, was the ability to retain the revenue on physical media. DVD, VOD releases, those were or not VOD, but straight to direct to video releases were essentially the way that those independent films got financed, or got money, because you could make it up. There's a guaranteed kind of return from renting it out to the big chains or the independents. But yeah, and I know Pig Killer did get a physical release, I believe, through one of the offshoots of Vinegar Syndrome's kind of
Sure.
boutique labels.
Yeah, no, and they did a great job, and I love, the fact that there is that avenue. And for me, it's just, that's one of the highlights of making these, of the a Vinegar Syndrome or TerrorVision or, Severin, or one of these companies picks up and puts it out in a physical format, which to me is just the icing on the cake of making any of these films, and something that I always put into the contracts, that if the distributor doesn't release it physically, the physical rights come back to me, and then I can find Vinegar Syndrome or someone else to put it out, because I love physical media, and that's really the only way I still watch films. I'm not a big streaming guy, so physical media to me is the the be all and end all.
I'm with you. I've got three more or two more of these Billy bookshelves behind me in this room, and a
Oh, it's
closet full of movies. So I always wanted my own video store. But I do believe that at some point we're at a point where we're able to get a Chad Ferrin box set from one of these companies, because
ooh,
they've done Andy Milligan box sets. I mean, I would say, objectively speaking, your films are much better made than an Andy Milligan film. So
well, you've made my day, because he actually is a hero of mine. I mean, the stuff that same with Ed Wood. I mean, the circumstances that they were under, the budgets, the whatever, and the fact that they got stuff done and it's in focus and it's entertaining is, hats off. And
yeah. We
to
don't want to
me,
be Russ Meyer, right? Just
right, I wouldn't
I
mind
never
Russ
lose any
Meyer.
money on my movies.
Right. No, I think, and especially, it's just one of those things that when, those box sets are great and the artwork is great, and you hope they do well, because, I would love to be in that class one day to have a box set like them. And, that's a great point. Thank you. I would,
I would
knock
love
on
to
wood.
see it. I'd buy it. So if anyone's listening out there, and I think to put some silver lining across the somewhat gray cloud of streaming and physical media's kind of dwindling existence, is that I do think that the love that physical media collectors have to hold on to films will persist, just like how we still press vinyl records.
Sure.
I think we'll always have that. And the amount of people that are trying to get into this game now, the content we're seeing, movies that I'll use Visual Vengeance as an example of a company that has like taken Vinegar Syndrome's business model and said, no, we can find smaller films
Right.
and give them like the best possible, red carpet, white glove release. So
Sure.
I think that there's enough people and interest out there for, a Chad Ferrin box set, but I'm just wishing this into existence. Um,
Please, wish, wish.
and I want to ask you about the practical effects and makeup effects in the film, because again, you're always working under, a budget. And I'm curious to know how much of your kind of thoughts about particularly some of the penis monsters and so all those things like was in the script versus what you said, hey, Joe, Victoria, like you guys go crazy. Here's an idea, just make whatever you want.
No, it was always in the script, and then you send the script to Joe, and he draws up some images of what he thinks it should look like. He sends it back. You give him a couple notes, or you give a thumbs up on what he sends, and you just go, "Hey, that's what I was better than I imagined. It's great. Let's go for it." And it comes down to a great collaboration so far with Joe, and now it's just how much will it cost? Okay, great. Let's put that in the budget, and you go and you make it. And Joe has been a godsend. He's fantastic and fun to work with, and he always pulls it off for next to no money, and it's just a joy to work with him.
That's amazing. I mean, and I just would love to see the notes you're giving on dick monsters, just kind of like, too veiny right here, something like that.
Right.
But, and you do have a lot, you do tend to collaborate with a lot of the same people, both in front and behind the camera. And I'm curious, particularly for those in front of the camera, do you tend to write these roles with them in mind because you know that you have these kind of inherent collaborators, or is it more just sporadic where, hey, I've got a new script, I know you can do great work, you'd be great for the role.
I think a little of both. I mean, originally, Roger Garcia was going to play the role that Miano plays, the Joe Slater, Jim Phelps role, but it was just one of those things where when the money fell out on that, it was like, okay,
Yeah.
Robert, do you want to do this? And knowing that he would knock it out of the park, and he did, and you know, and Eddie Furlong was kind of always in mind. Susan Prever, again, when the money changed and I rethought it and then rewrote that role for a woman, she dug it. So it was one of those things where that film in particular was kind of all over the place when it comes to casting. Of no one was really in mind, or the people that were in mind that I'd worked with before kind of fell through and then were replaced by other people that I'd worked with before. So it was kind of an interesting thing. But on other films, I usually just kind of just crank it out, and maybe in the back of my mind or subconsciously, I'm thinking of, oh, Sylvia Ross or Robert Miano for the, it kind of, but I just kind of go free as possible to just write, crank it out, and then kind of think about it, who would be best for it. On Dorothea, Robert Miano, the other true crime film we just finished, he was up for a different role, and then he filled in for another role. So it kind of, I don't specifically just think and lock myself into one actor unless, that film or that project started with that one actor's, like if Robert Miano says, hey, I want to do the story of, Al Pacino and I want to play Al Pacino, then I would write thinking of his acting style and whatever and combining it with, Al Pacino. But, not necessarily do I sit down and just think that I'm going to write this for a particular actor.
Yeah, well, now I've got a Robert Miano doing a hoo-ah, in my head. And I plan on asking Robert about this when I talk to him next week, but he's quite exposed in the film. And I'm curious if he was game from the start or you had to do a little bit of convincing with him.
No, he was 100% game. He bared it all in the film Girls Trip. I think that was one of the ones where he plays a homeless guy, and he shows everything in that film, and that was kind of his busting his cherry for doing a lot of nudity in films. So I knew he wouldn't have a problem with it, and he didn't, and he was fearless and great, and, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, he definitely leans into it heavily in the best possible way. So it makes it a joy to watch, especially the third act of the film is just complete mayhem in the best possible way. I can't begin to describe to folks, but I'll put it in our review of just like exploding non-uteruses and giant penis monsters.
Well, when you put
Just
it that way.
yeah, I know. Well, I mean, it's a surreal moment when you write these things because I had a press person send me an email saying, "Hey, love your review, but could you please remove cum sock from the title?" I said, "You know what? Sure, that's fine." Apparently, that's the line. But you did mention a couple other. You just finished rapping on Dorothea, and I also noticed you have an Ed Kemper and a Richard Ramirez film coming out, and also a Western, like a quasi-Western film.
Right.
So, anything you can share about some of these films, like if they have release dates or distribution yet?
Yeah, Ed Kemper is and Dorothea have both been picked up by Epic Pictures, and they're
Whoa.
releasing Ed Kemper in May with a little theatrical in April, and then the director's cut of Ed Kemper is playing at Another Night in Horror Film Festival in Wisconsin on March 9th, which is, again, director's cut, because the cut that Epic is releasing is less extreme and less
You got
offensive,
Pig
of
Killer.
course. So, you know, that might be the only chance, it's seen, which is kind of one of those, again, an exciting thing of physical media. And the deal I worked out is where I now have a director's cut that I can play festivals, and then I can go to Vinegar Syndrome and say, hey, do you want to put out the director's cut of this? And the same with Dorothea or any of these things. And it's, again, or it's having a bit of control on the director's version,
Right.
without with a distributor saying, sure, we'll put out whatever. But to have that guarantee, especially when you have to make edits, is just a nice safety net, artistically speaking, where you can at least say, hey, I'll cut it and change it to whatever you want. I really don't give a shit. It's your money, you're buying it, you're putting it out, but I want my version that I can, again, go out to a physical media distributor and have them put it out. And then I at least, I have my version alive somewhere. And the version that's streaming, I could give a shit about, because I don't really stream. So it's fine by me.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it is nice that the fact that these studios and distributors now are not in the business maybe of physical media, that it does give you some leverage, if you will, in the negotiation to say, yeah, you're not gonna, you don't have the means or the production arm to even do this anymore. So let me take
Sure.
care of that and find the people that will.
No,
And again,
and that's the good thing for filmmakers out there, that to know that you have, a bargaining chip. They might not care about that, or a theatrical release. They're basically going to do 1 week with Ed Kemper in L.A., but they're like, if you want to take it to other territories, Nebraska or New York or whatever, go for it and keep that money. So
hmm,
it opens it up a thing for me, and then calling up Breaking Glass or these other distributors I know and say, hey, do you want to do a little theatrical with this? And sometimes they say, sure, we'll give it a try, and sometimes they say, forget it. But at least you have that option
yeah,
that you're able to try, and you're not just waiting for it to come out on Shutter or Tubi or whatever it is. You've got some other avenues to get your film out there, get it seen, get some reviews, good or bad, and just give the film more of a life than it just dropping on some streaming service. You know that's the whole point of filmmaking, and the whole point of why I do festivals. At least it gives it a life before it
yeah,
comes out onto streaming or physical media or whatever it is. With festivals, it's great because at least it's living up and being seen until it finally comes out. So, because that's usually a long time. Once a distributor picks up a film, you're looking at usually probably 3 or 6 months before it's actually released. So it's nice to be able to get it out there and get a reaction and see, hey, is it going to find its audience when it's finally released? And you knock on wood, I've had good luck with festivals and a lot of fun playing them. And, so I hope to continue to do that with Dorothea and Ed Kemper and, the Western. That's been one of the hardest ones, where funding came in, fell through, and all these different things of why that's been languishing. But you just got to keep trying and hope for the best.
yeah. I mean, and as you said earlier, when it comes to honoring your investors' contributions, having these other bargaining chips certainly does help in being able to create some comfort on their end, saying like, hey, we're only going to get X amount from this. But especially someone like yourself who's kind of done this before and has some experience and has built a good network, it's easy to go to them and say, hey, we have other revenue streams behind just this one distribution deal. And I think that that's something that a lot of folks, you know, getting into film that want to make a film don't always understand the business side of it, and that there is this kind of, people will take a chance on something, but you often have to give up a lot in order to get,
Right.
especially as a new budding filmmaker. So I think your words will certainly help folks make sense of how they can position themselves better in the
Well,
negotiating room.
Well, I think a lot of them have just, and I hate to say it, they have just a hubris of, they think
Mm.
they've made fucking Citizen Kane,
Yeah.
and it's going to make billions of dollars, and that's just I get emails all the time of someone who say, we spent 600 fucking $1,000 on this movie, and there's no names in it. There's no, there's all this, and then their best offer is a release from Gravitas, straight to streaming, and it's like you're never going to make that money back,
Right.
ever.
Yeah, and
So
that did lost
know,
in streaming too.
and you should have, it's not trying to be mean about it, because that's a huge amount of money to gamble on a film. And if you do, that better get into the major film festivals, and it better
Yeah.
build up something instead of just being dumped by and I like Gravitas. I've got the Ghouls has put out through them now on streaming. So and I see checks from them, so they're good. They're but at the same time, a lot of these distributors, they're not asking, hey, how much did you spend on this? They
Yeah.
basically say, yeah, we'll either take it and you'll get no MG, or you'll get this much MG, or you'll get that, and then we're going to do this kind of release, and we're going to do that. And with a film that spends over a couple $100,000, it's hard to make that back unless you've got a film that really hits the mark. And I just don't think a lot of filmmakers realize that. They kind of think that we've got this, and we're going to make it, and it's going to go out, and it's going to make all this money, and it's one in a million.
No, I mean, there's an unaccounted
million.
for, there's an unaccounted variable, which is also time. I think there's so much about time and luck that often dictate something being success. I mean, there's movies that we all retroactively look back and say, wow, we really missed the boat on that one, but it's because, place and time are things that we can't exactly control. As much as you can make a great film, but at the same time, if you're releasing it at a time when that doesn't matter, or maybe there's something else kind of moving against it, those are things that will ultimately, unfortunately, determine some level of success.
Right,
Um,
right.
but I have one last question for you, Chad, and it's kind of a fun one about going back to Beyond the Wall of Sleep, which is if you were asked to program a double feature, and it could be one of your films, maybe we do the Unspeakable 4 or not, but if you're asked to program a double feature, one of them is Beyond the Wall of Sleep, and the other is a film of your choosing. What would you pick?
Ooh, God, that's a tough one. I guess because I ripped off the trailer when I did the Unspeakable Wall of Sleep trailer, the Toby Hooper, the film he was fired off of, that was directed by was it Bud, Kingdom of the Spiders guy? What the hell is the name of the film?
Which decade is it in? 80s or 90s?
Yeah, 80s, with the
Life Force? No.
no. Well, actually, Life Force is a good one to if you wanted a masterpiece with a B-level film. But I would say, it's Bud Carlos directed it. Now it's killing me.
Is it The Dark?
Yes, The Dark. I picked The Dark.
Wow,
Which would be a good double feature with Beyond the Wall of Sleep.
You know what? That's also a good deep cut as well. So if folks haven't seen The Dark, it's a true trip. Real strange film. So I'd buy a ticket to that double feature. Well, Chad, I just want to say thank you for spending some time with me again into today, and just remind folks that they can catch Unspeakable Beyond the Wall of Sleep. It's coming out on VOD on March 4th from Breaking Glass Pictures. We'll have more interviews and reviews for folks during the week of release. So Chad, I hope this one is a big success, and can't wait to see the Kempner and Dorothea films coming out later this year.
You got it. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Chad.